Hello and welcome to season 2 of Performance People with me, Georgie.
And me, Ben. Our guests this time round have 38 Olympic or Paralympic medals between them, 22 of them gold.
There are countless world records, 16 Everest summits, and the man responsible for some of the greatest inventions of our time.
And alongside them are their closest confidants. They will share what drives these exceptional individuals to their highest heights.
Performance People is free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget, you can also follow us on our Performance People social channels.
Now enjoy this week's episode.
Joining us on today's Performance People are a husband and wife team who understand exactly what it's like to operate and perform under the greatest of pressure.
Kenton Cool is a British mountaineer and adventurer who risks it all for the day job. Has climbed Mount Everest, a nosebleed-inducing 16 times.
We're joining Kenton is his wife Jazz Cool, who's a mindset and performance coach.
These two high-performance people have life-affirming stories to tell and elite performance lessons to share.
Success is, in my mind, coming back alive as friends with 10 fingers and 10 toes.
There have been not just hours, but days when I haven't heard from him. And in my mind, he's gone.
Got the wrong crampons. I just realised. No.
The wrong ones?
What have you just realised?
What's wrong with them?
I got the wrong crampons.
Well, hang on. This sounds like a bit of a major problem.
Crampons. Congratulations.
So I got all
You may need those Weetabix after all.
Yeah, I got all my kit laid out literally just behind the camera, and just where people were talking, just check my crampons in my crampon bag, and they are my ice climbing crampons, not my mountaineering crampons.
It's
a little nuance thing.
Congratulations.
So how big an issue is that?
Yeah. How personalised are they?
I'll go and get some in town tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
It's not really an issue.
Yeah.
That's another.
Okay, it's not like you're superstitious about using various different types of crampons for the job. Okay.
No.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
If he turns up in one piece with a wallet and a passport, everybody's happy.
That's all that they can hope for, is it?
Yeah, that's all.
Okay, guys,
Where's all you need? Let's do it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for joining us from Kenton from Kathmandu and Jazz from the Cotwolds, which is where your family home is. My worst fear over the course of the next hour is that at the end of it, Ben's going to say he wants to climb Everest with Kenton. So I'm just...
No, he doesn't.
Well, let's wait and see. I'm just going to put that out there. Let's see how much we can put him off Kenton in the course of the next hour. Tell me what Kathmandu's like, because it's the source of the place from where people start this adventure and also the place where they end this adventure. So there must be this big melting pot of emotions in Kathmandu, people celebrating, people elated, having finished the climb, and then others really nervous and full of anticipation for what they're about to do.
Yeah, I mean, what Kathmandu is like as a city, I think perhaps Jazz should answer that. But in terms of, because I've been here so often, I've seen such a developmental change. Whereas Jazz and the family came back in 21 and got a snapshot of what it is like now. But in terms of, and it's really interesting question that you ask, and we were discussing something very similar, my client for Everest and myself, or me this morning, that there's quite a lot of, or can be quite a lot of peacock strutting around. Most of the expedition teams would stay in a handful of hotels here. And there's almost a mental game. It's not a competition, but there's almost a mental game going on, almost trying to de-psych other people. I don't think anybody sets out to do that, but you could be at breakfast and a big Chinese team might come in, they've got all the labels on and they've got all the matching kit, and people are saying, oh, I climbed this, or I run my 10K time in this, or I can smash an ergo 2,000 meters in this. And it can be a little bit overwhelming to many people. And I don't think it's meant to be like that. I just think it's a strategy that some people have to cope with what lays ahead of them. Because obviously they've got a big adventure, whatever that may be, a trek to base camp, climb of Everest, a climb of other 8,000 meter peaks. And there is a certain amount of mental confusion, a certain amount of trepidation, there's pride on the line, and all these things, and that can manifest itself in slightly less than beautiful ways. And I think one of the ways it comes out is this, I think, quite ugly trait of strutting around, trying to be better than the person next to you. That's in terms of like the expeditions here. But in terms of what Kathmandu is like, I mean, Jazz, you came here a couple of years ago. What was your overwhelming sensation?
Oh, it's very, very rare, particularly with the family, young family, to go to a developing country. And Kathmandu is very vibrant, it's very loud, hugely, hugely busy. And they have this wonderful area where you can go shopping for pretty much everything, called the tourist area. And by the very fact that it's called the tourist area, I felt utterly ashamed to be there. And I really wanted to see the real sense and the real smells of the city. And in doing so, you then realise why there's a tourist area, because there is just zero infrastructure for the individuals that live in Kathmandu. They really are breadlining it, just struggling to stay alive. And then that's when you realise that a tourist area is giving them some financial security, and that actually spending our rupees there is helping. It's a real confusing dichotomy. It's wonderful, but it's an eye-opener and a leveler for sure.
Yeah, so you feel like on one hand, you're invading their environment, but you're helping to sustain it financially.
So if Ben did decide to come
Hang on, why are you pushing it?
No, but if he did decide that this is what he wanted to do, what is that process like? How do you vet people that go with you and climb with you? And how do you make sure that they're safe, you're safe, you know that they're up to the challenge? I mean, how can you ever be certain of that until you find yourself in those circumstances which test a person's character and skill?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, nothing is certain, nothing is guaranteed, no matter how hard we try. Yet at the same time, in exactly the same way that whatever team you're trying to put together, you go through a process of pressure testing the individual or the individuals. I spent a long time building a meaningful relationship, a trusting relationship between myself and whoever the client may be, and also the team that we have on the ground here. I work with an amazing Sherpa team, which everything I do out here I couldn't do without them. And it's generally a 2 to 3 year program from when I first engaged with a client to come in here to Kathmandu, well, certainly for Everest. And along that journey, along that pathway, we are constantly just stepping up a gear each time. We're looking to have experiences which push the individual out of their comfort zone. I use the term quite loosely. We're looking for failures in terms of if everything went smoothly in the build up to an Everest trip, then we haven't really tested ourselves. We're looking for experiences that we can reflect on. We're looking for experiences that we can learn from, so that we can either avoid them when we get to Everest, or if they happen again or something similar happens again, the individual, a team, or me can we've been here before. Okay, we've seen something like this. How did we cope last time? What did we do last time? What do we need to do now? So the process is certainly little stepping stones. If somebody's got no climbing experience, then we start to build up that resume. We build up the skill set required. We build up the mental resilience that's required.
How do you actually do that, though, Kenton? How do you do that? What does that actually look like? And Jazz, do you get involved in this process as well?
Well, Casey can answer the bit about what it actually looks like. But I think to add to your question, a lot of that screening process is not about the technicalities of climbing a mountain or how well they go at altitude. It is so much down to character, personality, and attitude. And one of the first questions that Casey will always ask a potential new client is, why Everest? And you can pretty much screen out 80 to 90% of individuals just by asking that very question. because the reason behind why they want to do it will describe the character, the attitude, and the personality. And then I'll allow Casey to add to your bit about how you stress test the other bits.
Well, stress testing is essentially taking someone out of the comfort zone. And as I say, it's baby steps, because what you don't want to do, you don't want to blow the envelope whereby the individual has a terrible time, because that could put them off climbing for life or adventure or whatever it may be. It's finding that sweet spot of stretching the boundaries. And it could be baby steps. We could be climbing in North Wales to start with. It could be as simple as an ascent of Snowdon. And then we build up over time. It could be the European Alps. I often go down to Bolivia. It could be Aconcagua, highest peak in South America. Things that I think will mirror to a certain extent the experiences which that individual is likely to go through on Everest. And it's different for everybody. Some people come to me with huge amounts of experience in terms of climbing. Some come to me with no experience. And it's tailoring what is required for the individual and then putting the program together. It's unfair, I think, to expect an individual to conform to a pre-existing structure that's in place, because everybody's different. Everybody is an individual. And it's the same with putting teams together. When you bring a team together, one of the most important things I believe in terms of leadership for that team is, and it's a really simple concept, everybody is an individual. We may have a common goal, a commonality right there, but we are different, and that needs to be understood and communicated. And once you have that understanding, then you're in a far better situation to come together with any form of uniformity, is that a word? To then forge forwards towards a common goal. And for me, it's a fascinating journey, taking the individual on that pathway. And ultimately, if we're successful in getting somebody up and down Everest, and let's be very honest, success is, in my mind, coming back alive as friends with 10 fingers and 10 toes. It doesn't necessarily mean a summit. If we are successful on that pathway, then selfishly, it's incredibly empowering and satisfying for myself. And it's something I'm very passionate about, and I love it. And one of the biggest difficulties is leaving the family and leaving Jazz to not only look after the family, but look after the business in Cool Company, and try to juggle, as you guys know, try to juggle family and business and your own sort of social calendar and everything else. And Jazz will probably laugh, because I don't have a social calendar when you go to Everest. But trying to find that balance in the environment so that we remain wholesome and healthy and good people.
I've just referred back to my humble career as a sports broadcaster, but you were never paid to do the job of reading the autocue. You were paid to do the job of when the autocue was spinning backwards and sideways and no one was telling you what was going on. And that was when it mattered most. So I guess it's in those moments, isn't it? When everything hits the fan, that you need to be able to know that you're around people that aren't going to put themselves or anybody else in jeopardy.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And the interesting thing is that they are scenarios that I certainly don't shy away from. They are scenarios that I actively try to seek out during that training schedule program, because that they are, it's a cliche, but they are the rich learning experiences. And the other thing is, they are the moments, often retrospectively, where I look back and go, I actually really enjoyed that. And perhaps it's a little bit different to having an auto cue go sideways or backwards or upside down or just cut out. I'm in these environments whereby the ultimate consequence is death. Yet at the same time, I find that those moments are arguably when I most feel alive. And it's also those moments that I look back on, maybe arrogantly or egotistically, I look back on them and think it's validated all the things that I've done over the last 25 years of my career. Everything which I've done up to this point has been leading to that crisis. And we handled that crisis as a team, and we moved forward. We didn't lose anybody. We still summited, or whatever it may be. We got out the storm. We got back alive. Whatever that situation is, and you look back on those moments, and you realize that happened because of experience. We live in a culture today where everybody's looking for hacks and shortcuts, and actually in-depth experience is so precious. And it doesn't matter what sphere that is in. It could be in some financial services, it could be sailing boats in the Olympics, it could be sailing around the world like Jazz, or whatever it may be. That deep-rooted experience is something which it can't be hacked, and it's so valuable when it comes to time-critical decision-making, when it really matters. And I think maybe the generation coming through, they perhaps don't fully understand or realize that, perhaps. And well, perhaps I'm being a bit unfair there. It'd be interesting to see what Jazz thinks.
I don't know. You talk about this so much that we could be here for hours talking about being on that edge and taking it to that place. To know that it's that experience that you can draw upon later. It's just that every time we go to that place at the time, it's very unsettling and very uncomfortable. But it has to be done. That is stress testing at its very limit, isn't it?
But Jazz, you're having to deal with, I always think that it's so much worse for the person who isn't in the moment. You're having to deal with the knowledge and the understanding of, and a little bit of knowledge is always a bit frightening because you know enough to know when a situation is really perilous or not. And you're at home, and like Kenton's saying, you're juggling everything else, but all the while, do you ever, because I find this with Ben when he's I say road testing, it's not road testing, sailing. when he's sailing the first prototypes of the next cut
Tide
boat.
testing.
Yeah, when it's the next cut boat. So it's not when he's done loads of different sailing on the same boat and he knows what the pressures are and what the stress tests are and how it's going to play out. It's when they're testing it for the first time. The stuff where they don't know everything, they don't know all the variables, they don't know the eventualities of this, that, or the other decision, or whatever that might be. And I wonder for you, obviously Everest is the mountain is ever changing, I suspect, Kenton. So every climb is different to the last, regardless of how well you know it. So Jazz, for you, is there forever this sick feeling in your stomach until he comes home? I mean, how do you feel from the start to the finish of an expedition?
Yeah, it's a fine question. We have protocols in place for that very reason. It's all we have ever known. So since we've been together, however many years that is, I should probably know, Everest has been a thing. But it's not just Everest, it's other climbs as well. And I have to say, I'm not going to say that because that is superstition. Everest is a very different mountain from other solo climbs that KC might do. But we do have some protocols in place. I'm very much of the opinion personally that nothing ever good comes from worrying, and worrying only makes things worse, not better. So what's the point? And I genuinely do stick by and believe in that. We also go on the protocol that this experience means that there are so many risks that can be taken out of the equation. So control the controllables, and then just focus all the time and attention on the things that we can't control and mitigate that risk as much as possible. And that's where I defer to Casey's experience, in that he will always be taking risks for sure, but they are calculated risks. And there's too much at stake for that calculation to not be there. And there are many protocols that he and I will use to calculate the risk that he's in at that moment and make decisions. Those decisions are very clear. And we stick by that. And the final thing that we do is go on the principle that no news is very much good news. And that if I hear from him, brilliant. If I don't hear from him, that's okay too. And I'm only ever going to get a phone call from Casey saying I'm fine, or from somebody else. And it's that somebody else that I am not going to want to speak to. So either I hear his voice or I don't, and that's absolutely fine. And there have been periods of time where I haven't heard from him forever, and it's assumed death, because the theatre of the mind is going to take you to that place. There's no road to getting there. Well, maybe he's kind of a bit of all right. Maybe he's a little bit hurt. No, it's extreme death immediately. And, there have been not just hours, but days when I haven't heard from him. And in my mind, he's gone. And there was an occasion where I did get a phone call from somebody that wasn't him. And as far as I was concerned, that was confirming that he wasn't coming home. But this person was very, very experienced, and they knew exactly what to do straight away. And the first thing they said was, "Hi, Jazz, he's okay." And we just live by the policy that no news is good news, that the risks that are being taken are calculated, but they do exist, and that there's absolutely no value in worrying.
Kenton, from your perspective...
That's an interesting question. You said,
go on.
You said extremely dead. Is that worse than dead?
Totally, yeah.
She stepped it up a notch, if that's possible.
It's like dead on steroids. It's like dead,
Yeah.
and then you get sampled.
Extremely
It's dead. It's dead turned up to 11.
What is summit day like for you? Can you just take us through what happens on a summit day and in the processes you go through, but also then the actual feeling of that itself?
I was doing a keynote, I don't know, 18 months ago, 2 years ago, forget who it was for, UBS or something like that, big financial institute. And I was talking through Summit Day, and then all of a sudden it hit me. For me, Summit Day is pretty much stress piled upon stress, piled upon a little bit of anxiety, piled upon a big heap of more stress. It's incredibly worrying. And the really interesting thing is that it never really hit me until I was up on stage, suited and booted, giving this presentation, and it hit me like a steam train. And it's like, oh my God. Because at 8,000 meters, there is no facilitation of rescue. You very much are out on a limb. And I know we have fixed lines, and we've got oxygen, and we've got Sherpa support, and we bring it down and down and down, and then we try to make it as safe as possible. But as soon as you step out of your tent and start moving in an upward direction, every footstep is taking you away from safety. So I'm asking a client to do something which their whole very being is screaming to not do. Climb higher up into the death zone. And the what ifs are constantly running through my mind, which is why I've got to run this binary thinking philosophy to just focus on those key aspects which actually have an impact on the day. What the weather's doing, the underfoot conditions, the amount of oxygen, physical, mental well-being of the team, all these things. I'm running these through all the time. However, let's flip it around the other side. If you cut Summit Day of Everest off and plonked it in the European Alps, it will be quite a sought-after climb. It's beautiful. It's invigorating. It's not technically overly challenging, but it's challenging enough. And then when the sun breaks the horizon over your right shoulder in Tibet about 4:15 in the morning, and the world comes alive, oh God. I mean, it's for those brief moments of nature doing what nature does at her very best, all the stress that's piled upon stress just evaporates. And I am lost in this moment of euphoria. The sun breaks the horizon, you're going to start to warm up. You've been watching the stars throughout the night because we climb through the night. You might have an electrical storm hundreds of miles away across in Sikkim, and you're watching this light up the cumulus clouds over there. And then you sort of breach the south summit, and that's when you first get the view of the summit, and you can see everything which lies between you and the summit. It's a little bit stressful actually, because when that's a bottleneck, there's a choke point on the mountain, so there's a little bit more stress just if you don't have enough stress. At the same time, you're in this majestic environment, which only very few people, although Jazz does like to point out, more people have summited Everest and have circumnavigated the world by sail. But very few people have ever seen this. And it's very special. And that moment is not lost on me. We get to the summit and it's like, hey, high fives, chest bumps, whatever it may be. And Jazz sometimes say, well, actually, that's the moment that I start earning the money, because most of the accidents occur on the way down. And I got to keep the client, the team, mentally and physically focused for the way down. So we got to be on it, like constantly. And then we get back down to the top camp, the South Col camp, and we're still not out of danger. We're still in the death zone. We're still breathing supplementary oxygen. And we're hungry. We're tired. We're mentally exhausted. You've got really dry throat from breathing this dry oxygen that's in bottled tanks. And then you've got to try to reinvigorate to get down to Camp 2. By the time you get down to Camp 2, you're out of the death zone. You're comparatively safe. But that focus to leave that top camp when all you want to do is put your head on the pillow and trying to get a few hours sleep is like, right, let's keep moving. And all the time, the linchpin, what's keeping this all together is the Sherpa team and me. And ultimately, the responsibility is with me. I'm the go, no go decision maker. And so many people talk and pontificate and make a fortune out of corporate speaking about climbing Everest. How many Everest leaders do you hear out there? Because that go, no go decision has people's lives attached to it. And that responsibility, we have a fantastic Sherpa team who have such depth of experience, but ultimately the buck's got to stop somewhere. And ultimately it stops with me. So the decision making in the lead up to that go, no go for Summit Day, I mean, that's super stressful in its own right. But then almost every footstep, you're constantly asking yourself the questions, the conditions, the oxygen, the things I mentioned before, and you're running these calculations the whole time. Was that go, no go decision the right thing to do? But once you execute, you're committed. So there's that running as well. And and then you get back down to Camp 2 and it's like, oh, thank the Lord. And it's like,
Have you ever thought that you got the go, don't go decision wrong?
Yeah. I mean, it happens. 2006. I think 2006 was a late summit. So Jazz and I had only just met then. Was at the time I was gunning for the summit late in the day. So we were fixing, it was 2006. We were fixing the rope. We had deep snow to contend with. Time was ticking. You passed the turnaround time. You're still heading towards the summit. The turnaround time is 1 o'clock. We summited, I forget now, 3:15 in the afternoon. So you're constantly thinking, I'm breaking the rules. Perhaps we shouldn't be here. If we turn around now, physically, mentally, logistically, we're screwed. We're not going to turn around and reinvigorate to go back up. So this is it. We've got to make this happen, but it's got to be safe. I turned the team around last year. We left the top camp. We went for about an hour and 15 minutes. I'm like, this isn't right. The weather's not playing ball. Let's turn around. So you can imagine the thought process and the decision-making process battling away on that for that hour and 15 minutes. The wind was up, it's battering, it's tugging at your down suit. And I'm just thinking, this is not good. Other teams are going, and other teams should never influence your own decision-making, but they're battling forward. The Sherpas are saying, no, we've got this, we can do this. And I'm like, no.
They must be the toughest.
Pull the plug, we're going to go back down.
Must be the toughest decision to make that. The bravest as well, I would have thought.
Oddly, it's a tough one to make because you're constantly thinking everybody else is going on. But that's where you just got to believe in yourself and that experience we were talking about. And I am making the decisions for my team. my client or our clients based upon their ability. And ultimately, I need to keep them safe. I want them to have a bloody good time, and I want them to get a summit in that order. And we probably could have summited that day. It would have been a bit edgy in terms of safety, but they would have had a terrible time. But it's having that confidence to make the decision without external influence. And that is hard then. And then, of course, the next morning, everybody's coming down from the summit, and the client's looking at it going, well, they summited. How can we turn around? And then you've got all day at the South Col, and then you've got to go again. And that's constantly, but I love it. Yeah, I have all that stress and anxiety, and I love it. That is my sphere of operation. And God, I that's where I feel alive. It's like forgive me, helming a bloody boat and doing it really, really well. That's where everything comes together. Everything you do comes down to these moments. Is when Jazz stands on stage and delivers something out the ballpark, and it's amazing, or whatever. Every now and then these things come together, and you have that perfect moment. And for me, that's Everest Summit Day, or Summit Day on any big mountain, or it's that opportunity to do something really bloody well.
Jazz, what's Summit Day like for you?
You've got to work at it.
What's Summit Day like for me? It is quite uniform, so I know all the timing. I know exactly where he should be at what moment, and I just don't sleep. So it's 24 hours. It's easy for me compared to him, and I'm just all the time knowing what's happening, and no news is good news. And I know exactly within sort of a 2-hour parameter of when I'm going to get a call from the summit, and if it doesn't come, then I start to panic. Until I get a call saying we've turned around, or and that's Everest.
Ben and I have similar conversations about stuff, although I think where you put yourself is possibly more perilous a scenario than where Ben
slightly
puts
more
himself.
Dangerous, I think. Yeah.
But we have a lot of conversations around this sort of thing, which, it's one thing when it's just you, or it's just you and the other half, and it's a whole other ball game, I think, when you've got children. The children thing just amps it up, doesn't it? An unbelievable amount. So do you feel that on your side? I mean, how much harder has it become to, say goodbye to Jazz, but also the kiddos, and sort of say, well, I'll be back whenever? And how hard is that pull now? Is it more and more difficult with each expedition? Because with each expedition, it's just more and more experience, as we've said, is a very important thing. But does it become harder and harder?
Yeah, I think it does. As the children have grown and developed, they have a better understanding about what the mountains entail, and avalanches or Sirac fall or high altitude. Willoughby was interviewed, this was back in the Apple House, so it's 5 years ago? Remember when Ollie came around and interviewed him, and his little legs, he would have been about 4 or 5 maybe. And his little legs are swinging on a sofa, and there's sort of cameras there. This guy, Ollie, asked him a question. What do you think about Daddy going to Everest? And he goes, I don't think it's a good thing because there's this area called the death zone, and it doesn't sound very good to me, and Daddy might die. And he was 4 or 5 saying that. It's actually a terribly sweet little interview thing. And then as they got older, they have a better understanding about what happens. I seem to have a coping mechanism. I don't know if it's the right one, and Jazz would say, well, undoubtedly not. That I'm quite good at being able to turn on and turn off emotion a little bit. I have a big closet where I just sort of sweep all the catastrophic emotion, which I've been in contact with, into the closet. And Jazz always says, well, one day the closet is going to burst open and you're going to get a tsunami and you're going to be in therapy for the rest of your life. And she's got a point there. But I do seem to have this switch whereby I can activate it and get on and focus on what I'm doing. And I don't want to say forget about everything at home, but certainly put it to one side a little bit. Certainly on Summit Push, on Everest, which is incredibly stressful as a guide, as a leader. We sort of grabbed this term binary thinking, where I'm only concerned about 5 or 6 things, and everything else I've got to try to push out of my mind. I've got to just think logically, not emotionally. As soon as emotion comes into decision making, and I know there's the whole gut feel thing, but let's put that to one side for now. It's got to be logical. And if you're using up valuable, cognitive thought about what's the family doing, I hope they're not worrying about me too much, or that's emotion, and that starts to infiltrate your mindset. It David Goggins would say it weakens your mind. I want to say it weakens your mind, but it's going to interrupt your ability to think in the moment about what it is you are doing, and that's really important. And I seem to have developed this over the years. And interesting enough, with modern technology and being able to WhatsApp the children and film them from base, and look at them on base camp, I don't know if that helps or it doesn't help. Of course, I miss the family, but I've got a job to do, and that job needs to be executed really, really well in order for me to get back home as quickly as I possibly can in one piece with a very happy client and da 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 da. So, am I being selfish and mean by switching the family off in my mind? Maybe. Or am I actually being diligent, and by doing so gets me back sooner and in one piece to be with the family? I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but having that ability to switch off when you need to, I think, is a very powerful tool to have.
Jazz, had you or would you ever ask Kenton to stop? Is there any circumstance where you'd say enough is enough?
No. We had a conversation about another mountain, K2. Was that last year? Was it the year before?
No, 21 I went.
Okay. The conversation had gone many years ago, I'll never climb K2. And then he climbed K2. And
I think the conversation was I would never guide K2.
And then you guided K2, right? Okay.
Yeah.
A little bit of semantics.
Either way around, it was.
So
it's
a very it's a very dangerous mountain, and that's a whole nother conversation. But the point is that none of us should be shackled from doing what we feel we want to do. We just need to put the protocols in place to make sure that it's done with as much conscientious thought as possible. And if I were to say, I don't want you to do that, of course I don't want him to do it, but if I were to prevent him from doing it, then I'm preventing him from being who he is. And knowing who he is, that would be a very unsavory move on my part. And I don't really feel that it's my place to do that. So I support him just so long as I know that the due diligence has done.
You're so much better a wife than I am. I'm constantly saying, do we have to do another America's Cup campaign?
Have you? I didn't notice. I just keep the earplugs in.
There's a really great interview with it was Kelly Slater's wife, the big wave surfer, or the amazing surfer that's been around for forever, and she was being interviewed, and one of the questions was, what's Kelly like to be when he can't surf? And she thought about it, and she used this beautiful analogy and said, imagine that you've grown up and all your life from childhood you've been training to be a dragon slayer, and that's what you're going to be. It's not simply your job, that's your very being. You are going to be a dragon slayer, and you train and you do all this right throughout your life, and then one day somebody says to you, oh, by the way, there are no dragons anymore. How would that make you feel? And she said, that's like Kelly when he can't surf. He's like a dragon slayer that's just found out there's no dragons left to slay. And I think I'd be the same. And I'm guessing, hey Ben, no, I don't really know you, but I'm guessing that if there was no ocean left to sail on,
Oh,
you'd probably
don't.
be like a dragon slayer who's just found out there's no dragons left to slay.
Yeah, I'd probably be quite painful. Yeah.
You'd be awful. You'd be absolutely horrendous company. I mean, your happy place. I suppose, Kenton, for you, your happy place is on a mountain. It's the same with Ben. His happy place is on the ocean. You know, and actually, whenever we take a family holiday, I resist it as much as I humanly possibly can because I don't want our whole lives to be about boats. But actually, if he is on a boat, he is in a much better place, and you are less connected with the office world or anything else that's going on in your life because you're in a happy spot and you're not constantly checking your phone or, you know, answering an email or a phone call or whatever else, because I think you feel comfortable, don't you? It's where you feel comfortable.
But I think with mountaineering, exploring, Kenton, there's this endless, the challenges out there, right? And, you know, I'm fortunate in what I do with being out on the sailing, being out in the oceans. There's always another challenge, another record. Just keep going. There's no reason to stop.
Yeah. We have a phrase as well. We talk about feeding the rat.
Oh yeah.
And that he has a little rat inside him that needs to be fed through whatever discipline that is in the mountains. So it could be mountaineering, it could be ice climbing, it could be rock climbing. It's just doing it, and it needs to keep being fed. And if it's not fed, it will start to eat him from the inside. I hate that rat.
You must have such a big impact on how he approaches each and every one of these expeditions.
Yeah, I do ponder that quite a lot about how the sort of the clunk click has allowed this experience that we're both having to work so well. And I do ponder that a lot. And there is so much about who I am as an individual that helps both of us create a platform to allow it to work. I'm very other person centered. You know, as an individual commercially, I am in the service of others. And so all the time, if I'm not doing it professionally, I'm doing it personally at home with the kids or with KC. I'm in that coach mode, and having the empathy to be able to put my feet in someone else's shoes and sit in their chair and see things from their perspective, I think has really helped us as a couple to navigate the nuances of our life, because we're very, very aware, and I know we're in good company, that we are quite unique, that we are quite different, that we don't fit into any sort of preordained mold, so to speak, both as a couple and as a family. And I do ponder that a lot. I think that there's a reason that I do what I do and that we are together because of that.
And Kenton, I mean, from your side, I mean, could you be doing what you're doing repeatedly without Jazz being there in her role as your partner, but also, you know, in that professional capacity, because she has so much insight and so much understanding of where you need to be and who you need to be?
I think I could do what I do without Jazz. I don't think it would be done to the same standard. But I think the bigger question is, I would struggle to see how I could have any family unit without somebody with a level of empathy and understanding and also tolerance. That is Jazz.
Also, I suppose juggling all of this, and I have some experience of the juggle as well. When you're juggling, do you ever just lose it? Do you ever just completely lose the plot? Because everything Kenton's going off to do is brilliant and exciting and fantastic and, you know, sometimes headline making. But do you ever just go, oh God, there's so much on my plate?
An annoying answer is no. Because I think if I got to that stage, it would then just literally be it. It would be done. The wheels would come off, never to be returned. I just don't think I fit in enough time for that notion to surface. I fully sign up to the fact that it's probably there somewhere, just don't give it the time.
Well, isn't
of
that
day.
interesting? Because you say to
I know
that's
that's
really
an
that's
annoying
really
answer.
interesting because you say to Kenton about compartmentalizing the that some of the awful things that he will have seen
Yeah.
on the mountain, and at some point you are going to have to take those out of the wardrobe, and you're going to have to deal with them and face them, and then you may end up having to really face them. And yet this is the same thing that we're talking about here, where you're concerned.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. I go on that worry factor. It's just get rid of it. There's no point. It's wasted energy. And I'm a real planner. I'm quite binary. I'm either absolutely planned to the nth degree, or I'm seat of my ask, and there's nothing in between. And most things are quite well planned to the point where it won't allow me to lose it. I just can't.
So what does that?
Well, I think the really interesting thing is, if you think about crisis management, and I don't want to say our life is a constant crisis, but it feels like that sometimes. It is a bit seat of our pants. We hand over the baton at some stupid o'clock in the morning. I come in from a climbing trip, high five to Jazz at 5 in the morning, and she's off to meet clients in London, and we try and look after the children. We don't have help with the client care, child care. It is like being in constant crisis. And the one thing that you can never have in crisis is, if you lose it, as Jazz says, if you lose it in a time of crisis, you're never going to get it back. And you see that time and time again. And it doesn't matter what field that is in. A time of crisis, you need to be as cool, calm, and collective as you possibly can be. And it does feel like sometimes our lives are constant. It's a constant crisis. It's like, oh my God, I can't let it go now. And as Jazz said,
It's kind of fun though.
But yeah, it's what we were saying earlier. I mean, I like it when it's on the edge. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
How do you? I've seen you talk numerous times about this incident with Mr. Lee in 2013. And how you and what that sort of period of time was like for you, and how you've managed or not managed to deal with it subsequently. Is that still a thing? That are there some things that you can't fundamentally deal with, that you just have to push to one side?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jazz would say there's pretty much everything that comes with emotional. I'm trying to think what a term that Jazz would use. I can't think of one. Emotional adulthood. I am emotionally challenged in many ways, and as I said earlier, I have this terrible trait of shoveling things into the corner and hope that they never reappear. Mr. Lee, for the listeners or viewers, a Taiwanese man that died in my arms back in 2013. I haven't processed that. Jazz and I met up once in, was it Dubai? It was Dubai, wasn't it? We were buying engagement rings in Dubai, of all places. I was coming back from Everest.
Just the one?
Where did you get my one? Did you not get my one there?
You don't get an engagement ring there.
No, a wedding ring. What am I talking about? Well, in this modern age, maybe I can have an engagement.
Yeah, why
ring.
not? You go.
You do you, sweetheart.
We're all for equality on this show.
No, where's my engagement ring, Jazz? Anyway, we met up in Dubai, and a friend of mine in Yaki had died on Annapurna, and I essentially spent the first 3 or 4 hours. We went to the bar. We just arrived in Dubai. I'd flown in straight from Everest, and I just dissolved at the bar. I was pretty much in tears for the next 3 days. That's not emotionally dealing with it. I just sweep it away and I hope it never reappears. And Jazz, with her background in coaching, and I know that's about the worst thing I can possibly do. I'm 50 this year, and to a certain extent, up to that point or up to this point, it's kind of worked. It's a dangerous thing to say in front of Jazz. She's like, but yeah, I mean, I have seen a lot of things that I perhaps don't really want to have seen, but it's happened and I've been involved with it, and be it death or trauma, and yeah, it's something you got to bundle up and try to deal with in whatever way that is for you as the individual, and move on, because the world keeps turning and tomorrow's another day.
To a certain extent, you've got to accept that's going to happen, right? Doing what you do, it is dangerous. You're going to get yourself into situations and have experiences.
It's not to normalize it at all. I mean, three Sherpas lost their life on Everest earlier this week or late last week in an icefall collapse. There was a tragedy on Annapurna 2 days ago.
I didn't know you knew about that.
Yeah, well, I knew Noel. And it happens. And that's not to not be sad about it. The most important thing I think that we can, it's the mountains, the high mountains. There's always a degree of danger. Jazz said earlier, we're very good at risk mitigation, but we can't eradicate risk. Certainly in the big mountains, there's too many variables that we have zero control on. I've lost numerous friends in the mountains, even more acquaintances and people that I haven't known, and it's always going to happen. It really is. And I know the same happens in big boat sailing. It happens in anything that's got an adventurous theme to it. There is going to be an element of danger, and that's one of the things which is so addictive and so attractive and so alluring of it. It's the thrill that we get. And if we didn't want to partake in these things, well, nobody's making us do these things. We do it partly of our own free will. And I often say, if you're not willing to accept the consequence of the risk, or whatever that risk is, then you shouldn't be debating about whether it's for you or not.
Jazz, you talk a lot about protocols. I mean, this is a really hard question to ask. Have you two got a protocol for if anything did go wrong? You must have discussed that. Have you got any sort of thought process as to how you would deal with that?
It's a very interesting question, and beyond life insurance, which is so hard to get for somebody that does what he does. You shuffle up above 5,500 meters. No one's looking at you. Underwriters think you're a lunatic, which is probably a fair call. Beyond life insurance, the answer to that question is no. We don't have any protocols for that, and more than anything, simply because I feel it's courting it, and we have. I'm a huge optimist, and I go with optimism, and everything else gets dealt with as a logistical or a pragmatic issue afterwards. And my first worry, if that were to happen, and it's an uneasy subject to talk about, my first worry, of course, would be the kids. And we have, when Kenton goes away, we become the three amigos. That's just what we term ourselves, and it feels very safe in that space. And even just saying it feels safe. And we've created such a very, very strong bond as a three of us that should anything happen, I know that would secure us and sustain.
Wow, that's a very powerful answer.
It's the other mountains that are trickier. We had a nasty K2 moment where the Garmin InReach had a little bit of a blip and it looked like he was going downhill rather than up. And so, obviously, my brain goes, oh, well, that's him just diving off the edge then. So, there are some summit days where there's less comms, where it can be a little bit more challenging. But it's just have faith.
That's when you're better off leaving the tracker at home, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Totally hate it.
I mean, we started writing, having a little bit of knowledge, having all the technology that we have today, the whole no news is good news. We're constantly connected, sat phones, iPhones, and it's really hard to instill with people. This might run out of battery. The Garmin could be dropped. The sat phone might not connect. China puts a block on the sat, or whatever it is. There's so many reasons why you can't be in communication. But we just expect it in this day and age, in the society that we live in. And it just generates that level of anxiety and worry if somebody does not call.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, my first ever expedition to Pakistan, I had, apart from one double-page piece of paper, which I faxed back to my dad's office, no communication with home for 7 weeks. No communication. Nobody thought I died. Everybody just thought I was having a bloody good time in Pakistan, which I was.
That was in our previous life, pre-connectivity. Yeah, the good old days.
Yeah.
We can remember those. Our children never will.
The thing I need to...
Yeah, so
they
true.
were. But the thing I need to keep remembering, and Jazz is very good, we had a little chat about this on Sunday, is I need to remember that these expeditions, it's not simply me being here in Kathmandu on Everest, it's an expedition for Jazz at home.
Yeah.
And in the same way that Jazz is phenomenal at positioning herself in the shoes of the others, her clients, people she coaches, me, the children, I need to do the same. And I need to have an understanding about what it is like at home. Quite early in our relationship, because I was always the one going away. I think Jazz went to the BVI racing or something like that. I'm like, Jesus, she's gone away somewhere.
Oh, that sounds familiar.
What do I do?
How dare you?
Yeah. Oh, she's not in contact. What's going on? Is she okay? What's happening over there? So I got a little glimpse, just a little glimpse of what it's like. And cliche, I know, but at least as stressful for Jazz, if not more so than me being there in the moment, for real.
So as we draw it all to a close, I want a Jazz tip, a performance tip for how you can be better.
Oh, that's what you're going to ask for makeup.
No, I'll ask you afterwards, Kenton. I'm all about Jazz. Jazz, give me a tip for how I can be better, how we can perform better every day. Bearing in mind, this is a performance podcast. It is all about people that want to know exactly
Indeed.
that.
Okay. Yeah. So performance is an interesting word and it can be interpreted in so many different ways. So I make it a little bit more understandable for me. Performance translates to progress. And oftentimes we can set ourselves quite lofty ambitions and they're so far away from where we are right now that they become intimidating and ultimately unfulfillable. And progress can be a small step because a small step is still a step forward. And every day, the best performance tip is, what does progress look like today?
That's a very good one.
Yeah, very
Kenton, you're going to have to up the ante here. A performance tip from yourself.
Don't forget
How do I follow that?
Don't forget the crampons.
Don't forget your crampons.
Yeah, don't forget the
Don't
crampons.
forget your goddamn crampons, or your croutons, as I refer to them.
The croutons. I've got the crampons. They just happen to be the wrong crampons. I think a lot of it is belief. I mean, for me, when I'm climbing at my best, it's confidence and belief in myself. The main reason why people don't summit Everest on their first attempt would be because their mindset isn't quite aligned with what they're doing. And that often comes down to self-belief and confidence. And I think if you can get that right, and I'm not saying that you need to come in with arrogance. I mean, some people confuse confidence with arrogance. You go to Everest with arrogance, it's going to come back and bite you in the backside. You need to go there with a certain degree of reverence. I believe you need to be humble. But at the same time, you need to go there with a confidence and understanding about what it is that you are attempting to do. And, perhaps a little bit like Jazz was saying, incremental progress. Don't let perfection get in the way of better. Because, we always I think a lot of people look for perfection, but actually better. How can I be better than perhaps I was yesterday? Or how can we be better than we were last week? We're never going to be perfect. As Jazz said, it's unattainable and it can be intimidating. So, how can we be better? So that's a bit like Jazz. But I feel like I've underwhelmed that answer because, Jazz just Jazz took the middle stump out with that one. Yeah.
No, it's brilliant. Thank you so much. Well done, Jazz. Brilliant. Nailed it. Definitely. Good luck on your expedition.
Yeah.
Who are you taking up the mountain this time? It's Richard Walker, isn't it?
Richard Walker, chairman of the Iceland Group of supermarkets, food warehouse. If anybody's listening to this, he is. He loves the cold.
There's Cool and there's Iceman.
Yeah.
God, of course.
But he is trying to raise £1 million to build a specialist Alzheimer's unit in London. So if anybody is listening and they have the inclination, just check him out. Richard Walker, you can find him on social media. And if you have £5, £10, please do click through on that. That's a shameless plug, but I think it is a very great cause, Alzheimer's, that he's trying to support. So, Richard Walker, he's a great individual. Jazz knows him. I know him. Known him for a long time. Really excited to be here with him, and I think we're going to have a great fun time, and really hope that in 3 or 4 weeks' time we're coming back with certainly as friends, having had a really good time, and fingers crossed with the summit
And the right crampons.
Don't keep bringing that up.
Guys, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
The thing is, you can always make things work. Those crampons will
that
be
is
up
not
to the
what
job.
Jazz wants
They're
to
just
hear.
not-
She does not want to hear that. She wants you to go out and buy the best performing
they're
crampons
not
ever.
Really.
I've probably got some in my kit store in Pangboche, so I'll contact as soon as we finish this. I'll contact Dorji and say, "Hey, Dorji, have we got any crampons in Pangboche?"
Thank you both.
Good.
That's brilliant.
Thanks so
Thank
much
you
for your time. I
thank you
really
so much.
appreciate it. Okay, so great chat from a couple that are really living life at the extreme end of things.
You could say that, yeah.
Yeah, pushing it hard.
Fancy climbing Everest after that conversation?
Yeah, I think
I
more so
knew you'd
after
say
that.
that. I
More
knew
so
you'd
after
say
that.
that.
And because the one thing I really like
Only
about
if you could
that
go
from-
with Kenton.
Well, yeah, only. But that moment, which is not, doesn't matter whether you're climbing Everest or you're, trying to win an Olympic gold medal or whatever you're doing in life, it's your thing you've worked towards, you train for, you practice for. And when it all comes together like it does for Kenton on summit day, that's when he most feels alive. And that's actually a magical moment. And I think trying to get across to people that, okay, there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot at stake, huge amount at stake for Kenton and his team at that moment, but to enjoy that and not be scared, not be intimidated by the pressure. That was a great example of it.
How about feeding the rat? Can you relate to that?
No, I think you can.
No, but it's true, isn't it? Like, I think people who have this burning ambition or this absolute passion for a thing, whether it be the oceans or the mountains or whatever it might be in your life, if you don't feed it, then something else falls off the wagon, right? Because you just absolutely need it, don't you, in your life? So if you stop someone from doing something that they ultimately adore, it could be more problematic than you could know. This is like me lecturing myself.
It is. Well, I think you got the balance just about right.
Thank you for watching and or listening. This has been Performance People. We are Ben and George Ainsley, and remember, from what we've learnt today, strive for progress, not necessarily perfection.
Wonderful.